A white woman's accusation shattered the peaceful afternoon, pointing her finger at an innocent black child with unfounded claims of theft. She had no idea the humiliation and regret awaiting her when she discovered the boy's father was one of the most respected figures in the community. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the polished floors of the Houston supermarket. It was just another Saturday morning for most shoppers, but for Michael Johnson, this ordinary day would become a permanent scar on his young life. The 14-year-old boy stood in the candy aisle, his hand reaching for a pack of gum, completely unaware of the storm about to break over him. Claire Davis noticed him from the end of the aisle. Her designer handbag hung from her shoulder as her eyes narrowed, tracking Michael's every movement with unwarranted suspicion. Without hesitation or evidence, she strode toward him, her heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. "Are you stealing?" Her voice cut through the ambient chatter of the store like a knife, loud enough to ensure everyone nearby could hear the accusation. Michael froze, his fingers still touching the pack of gum he'd been about to place in his shopping basket. His heart hammered against his ribs as he slowly turned to face the woman. Around them, the routine buzz of shopping halted. Other customers stopped their carts, heads turning to witness the confrontation. "No, ma'am," Michael managed to say, his voice barely audible. "I was just—" "Don't lie to me," Claire interrupted, her voice growing sharper. She stood tall, using her authority as an executive to intimidate the teenager. "I saw you sneaking around. Empty your pockets right now." Michael's cheeks burned with humiliation as he felt dozens of eyes boring into him. His hands trembled as he turned his pockets inside out, revealing only a few dollars and some loose change. The money he'd brought specifically to pay for his items. "See, I have money," he explained, his voice cracking slightly. "I wasn't stealing anything." But Claire wasn't listening. Her accusation had already branded him in the eyes of onlookers. An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter. A store employee, Anna Brown, watched from nearby, her face reflecting shock and discomfort at the scene unfolding before her. "People like you always have an excuse," Claire continued, her words dripping with prejudice. "I'm going to speak with the manager." Michael stood rooted to the spot, dignity crumbling under the weight of the false accusation. His eyes stung with tears he refused to shed, not here, not in front of everyone. The pack of gum lay forgotten as the teenager faced the crushing reality that in someone's eyes, his mere presence was enough to be considered criminal. Claire Davis's expensive perfume hung in the air like a suffocating cloud, a scent Michael Johnson would forever associate with humiliation. The 14-year-old's hands trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket, desperate to prove his innocence in the middle of the Houston supermarket. "I have money right here," Michael said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I wasn't stealing anything." The executive's perfectly manicured finger remained pointed at him, her designer watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Then why were you being so suspicious, hovering around, looking over your shoulder?" Anna Brown, a young employee stocking shelves nearby, watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. Her face had drained of color, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Perhaps fear of losing her job if she intervened, or simply shock at the baseless accusation unfolding before her. "I was just looking at different flavors," Michael explained, fighting to keep his voice from cracking. He wanted to run, to disappear into the polished tile floor, but his father's words echoed in his mind. "Never let anyone make you feel less than who you are." So instead, he stood tall, swallowing the tears that threatened to spill, dignity intact despite the public humiliation. A few feet away, a customer quietly raised their smartphone, the camera lens capturing every moment of the confrontation. The device recorded Claire's dismissive scoff, the tension radiating through the aisle, and the raw injustice of a child being branded a criminal without evidence. "People like you always have excuses," Claire continued, her voice growing louder, drawing more attention from curious shoppers. "I've worked in retail. I know what theft looks like. Michael pulled out a $20 bill from his pocket. "I was going to pay for it. I have money." But the woman's suspicion didn't waver. Her words grew more cruel, more absolute with each passing moment. "Sure you were, after you got caught." Anna's fingers tightened around the price scanner in her hand, her knuckles white. She wanted to speak up, to defend the boy, but fear kept her silent, a silence she would later regret. Michael stood his ground, trembling but composed, as Claire continued her tirade. He couldn't know that this moment, this painful, public accusation, would eventually connect their lives in ways neither could imagine. Nor could he know that Anna's silent witness would later become his unexpected ally, or that the video being recorded would eventually shatter Claire's carefully constructed world. For now, all he knew was the sting of prejudice and the scent of expensive perfume that seemed to mock him with every breath. Michael Johnson slumped in the passenger seat of his father's sedan, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. The air conditioning hummed softly, but it couldn't cool the burning shame that lingered on his cheeks. Robert Johnson gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles whitening as they pulled away from the supermarket parking lot. The respected CEO of Innovate Solutions had arrived minutes after receiving his son's panicked call, only to find the 14-year-old trembling near the checkout counters. "She didn't even let me explain," Michael whispered, breaking the heavy silence that had settled between them. His voice cracked slightly. "Everyone was staring at me like I was... The words dissolved as the first tear escaped. Michael turned toward the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass as his shoulders began to shake. The memory of Claire Davis's accusation echoed in his mind, her voice sharp and certain, cutting through the supermarket's ambient noise with devastating precision. Robert glanced at his son, then smoothly pulled the vehicle to the side of the road. Without hesitation, he unfastened his seatbelt and reached across to pull Michael into a firm embrace. The boy's composure finally shattered completely, his sobs muffled against his father's shoulder. "Listen to me," Robert said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "What happened today was wrong. That woman had no right to treat you that way." Michael pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "But everyone believed her, Dad, just because she said it. And that's exactly why we can't let this go," his father replied, gently squeezing his son's shoulder. "Your dignity isn't something anyone has the right to take from you. Not a stranger, not someone with authority. No one." The teenager nodded slowly, his breathing steadying as he absorbed his father's words. "You know what true strength is," Robert continued, his eyes meeting his son's. "It's standing tall when others try to bring you down. Never let injustice silence you." Michael straightened in his seat, something resolute forming behind his eyes. "What that woman did today says everything about her character and nothing about yours," Robert added, starting the engine again. "Remember that." As they pulled back onto the Houston street, Michael felt something shift inside him. The humiliation remained, but alongside it grew something else, a quiet determination that would soon reshape not just his life, but the lives of everyone involved in that fateful morning encounter. Michael Johnson stood frozen at the marble reception desk of Innovate Solutions, his fingers tracing the cold, polished surface. 4 days had passed since the supermarket incident, but Claire Davis's accusatory voice still echoed in his mind. "Are you stealing?" The 14-year-old boy swallowed hard, fighting the knot forming in his throat. This corporate lobby, with its gleaming surfaces and hushed conversations, felt as unwelcoming as that supermarket aisle had been. He glanced at his watch, still 15 minutes before his father would be free. Michael considered texting Robert to say he'd wait outside instead. The memory of strangers' stares burned fresh in his mind, making his palms sweat against the marble countertop. Every suited professional who walked by seemed to carry the same judgmental gaze he'd faced that Saturday morning. "Michael, is that you?" The gentle voice startled him. Looking up, he found himself staring into the kind eyes of Anna Brown. The same woman who had witnessed his humiliation at the supermarket now sat behind the reception desk, her employee badge glinting under the lobby lights. "I didn't know you worked here," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna nodded, her smile genuine. "Just started last week. Your father's company has a great reputation." She leaned forward slightly. "How are you holding up?" The simple question, asked with such sincerity, nearly broke his composure. Most adults had either ignored what happened or awkwardly changed the subject when he entered a room. But Anna's eyes held no judgment, only understanding. "I'm okay," he managed, though his trembling fingers betrayed him. The receptionist glanced around before speaking again. What happened at the store wasn't right. Not everyone thinks like that woman did. Michael exhaled slowly, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. In Anna's presence, the lobby seemed less intimidating. The marble beneath his fingers no longer felt like ice, and the echo of Claire's accusations dimmed slightly. "My dad will be down soon," he said, straightening his posture. "I'm meeting him for lunch." Anna smiled and offered him a visitor's badge. "You can wait in the sitting area if you'd like. It's more comfortable than standing here." As Michael clipped the badge to his shirt, he felt a flicker of courage return. He nodded gratefully to Anna and made his way to the plush chairs nearby. Though still anxious, he no longer felt the urge to flee. Sometimes, he realized, justice came in small moments, in the kindness of a witness who refused to look away, in the dignity of being treated like a person worthy of respect. He settled into the chair to wait for his father, drawing strength from the knowledge that not everyone was blind to injustice. The marble reception of Innovate Solutions gleamed under the morning light as Michael Johnson sat nervously on one of the sleek leather chairs. His fingers drummed against his knee, a habit he'd developed since the incident at the supermarket. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning activity, employees swiping access cards, the soft hum of conversation, the distant ring of phones. Then came the sound that made Michael freeze. The rhythmic click of heels against the polished floor announced her arrival before he even saw her. Claire Davis strode through the revolving doors, her posture impeccable, head held high as if she owned the building. Her navy blue suit was pristine, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that emphasized her sharp features. Michael's breath caught in his throat. The executive walked past him without a second glance. But it didn't matter. He recognized her instantly. The same woman who had humiliated him days ago now moved through the space with complete confidence, unaware that her worlds were about to collide. What struck him most wasn't her appearance, but her scent, that distinctive perfume that had surrounded him during his accusation, now wafted through the lobby, making his stomach twist into knots. From behind the reception desk, Anna Brown watched the scene unfold with widening eyes. The former supermarket employee, now working her second day at Innovate Solutions, immediately recognized both figures. Her gaze darted between Michael, sitting small and tense in the waiting area, and Claire, who was now checking in for her morning meeting with the leadership team. Anna's hand moved almost instinctively to her pocket where her smartphone rested. Her thumb hovered over the screen as she recalled the video she'd saved. 14-year-old Michael standing dignified while Claire loudly accused him of theft, the other shoppers watching in uncomfortable silence, the boy's quiet insistence that he had money to pay. She had kept the recording, sensing that someday it might matter. Claire signed the visitor log with a flourish, completely oblivious to Anna's recognition or Michael's discomfort. She checked her watch impatiently, tapping her manicured fingernails against the marble counter. "Mr. Johnson will be down shortly," Anna said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Claire nodded dismissively, unaware that the Mr. Johnson in question was connected to the very boy she had wrongfully accused. As she turned toward the elevator bank, Anna's fingers closed around her device, a decision forming in her mind. The truth wouldn't stay hidden much longer. The boardroom fell silent as Robert Johnson stood at the head of the table. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished surface. Claire Davis sat with perfect posture, her leather-bound notebook open before her, pen poised to take notes on what she expected would be a routine meeting. "Before we begin," Robert announced, his voice carrying the authority that had built Innovate Solutions into a Houston success story, "I'd like to introduce someone special." He gestured toward the door, where Michael Johnson stood hesitantly. "My son, Michael." Claire's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The confident smile she had worn moments before faltered for just a second. A crack in her carefully constructed facade. She recognized the boy immediately. The same boy she had publicly accused of theft just days ago now stood before her. The son of the company's CEO. "Pleasure to meet you all," Michael said quietly, his voice steady despite the tension vibrating through his body. His eyes met Claire's briefly, and in that moment, the executive felt a cold realization wash over her. Claire quickly recovered, plastering on her professional smile. "Wonderful to meet you, Michael," she said, her voice honeyed but hollow. Robert placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael will be shadowing me today. I believe it's important for him to understand what integrity and respect look like in a professional environment." The emphasis on respect wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Claire's knuckles whitened around her pen. "I'd also like to acknowledge Anna Brown," Robert continued, nodding toward the receptionist who had quietly entered with a stack of reports. "Her professionalism has been exemplary since joining our team." Anna nodded politely, but her eyes held Claire's for a beat too long. The executive felt her stomach drop as she recognized the former supermarket employee who had witnessed everything. "It's remarkable how small Houston can feel sometimes," Robert added casually. "The connections we make, the moments we share with strangers, they have a way of coming full circle." Claire's fingers tightened around her notebook, her knuckles turning white. A chill ran down her spine as she realized Robert wasn't speaking in generalities. He knew, somehow, he knew exactly what had happened at that supermarket. "Now," Robert said, his tone shifting to business, "let's discuss accountability and company culture. Shall we?" As the meeting began, Claire felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble beneath her feet. The video spread through Innovate Solutions like wildfire. Anna Brown had quietly forwarded the supermarket footage to Deborah Wilson, the Human Resources Director, with a simple note: "This happened to our CEO's son." Within hours, whispers filled the hallways and break rooms. "Did you see what Claire did to that poor boy? That's Robert Johnson's son," she accused. The revelation created a ripple effect. Employees who had suffered silently under Claire Davis's management for years suddenly found their voices. Sarah White, who had endured Claire's cutting remarks and impossible demands for 5 years, was the first to step forward. "She once made me rewrite a presentation 17 times, then took credit for it," Sarah confided to Anna over coffee. "When I asked for recognition, she threatened to have me fired." Others joined in, sharing their stories in hushed tones. The marketing team recalled how Claire had publicly humiliated their junior designer for a minor font error. The accounting department described how she routinely dismissed female employees' ideas while praising identical suggestions from male colleagues. "It was never just about performance," one analyst explained. "It was about power and intimidation." By afternoon, Deborah had collected 12 formal complaints. She scheduled an immediate meeting with Claire, her face grim as she prepared the conference room. Claire strode in confidently, her designer heels clicking against the floor. "I have a meeting with Robert in 30 minutes, she announced, glancing at her watch. "This won't wait," Deborah replied, closing the door firmly. She placed her tablet on the table. "We need to discuss an incident at Westfield Supermarket last Saturday." Claire's expression flickered momentarily before she regained composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." Without a word, Deborah pressed play. The video was crystal clear, Claire's voice accusing Michael. The boy's dignified response: the surrounding shoppers' shocked expressions. "That's Robert's son," Deborah said quietly when the video ended. Claire's perfectly manicured fingers trembled slightly. He was behaving suspiciously. He was reaching for gum, Claire, with money in his hand. The executive's face drained of color as Deborah slid a folder across the table. "These are complaints from your team members. Patterns of similar behavior. Discrimination. Intimidation." Claire stared at the mounting evidence against her. The carefully constructed image she'd maintained, the powerful, respected executive, was crumbling before her eyes. She had become the villain in a story she thought she controlled. "The board is meeting now," Deborah said, standing. "They're waiting for you." Robert Johnson stood at the head of the conference table, his posture commanding yet calm. The leadership team of Innovate Solutions sat in tense silence, exchanging nervous glances as they sensed the gravity of this unexpected meeting. The CEO's expression revealed nothing as he carefully placed his hands on the polished surface. "I've called you here because the foundation of our company is at stake," Robert began, his voice measured but firm. Innovate Solutions was built on respect, integrity, and equal opportunity for all. Today, we must demonstrate that these aren't just words on our website. The executives shifted uncomfortably as Robert nodded to the HR director, who distributed printed screenshots of the supermarket incident. Several gasped as they recognized Claire Davis in the images. "What you're seeing is one of our executives publicly humiliating a 14-year-old boy based on nothing but prejudice," Robert continued. "That boy is my son, Michael." Claire's face drained of color. She attempted to interject, but Robert raised his hand. "I'm not here as Michael's father today. I'm here as CEO of a company that will not tolerate discrimination or abuse of power at any level." The HR director spoke next, detailing the evidence Anna Brown had provided, along with testimonials from Sarah White and other employees who had suffered under Claire's management. "Effective immediately, Claire Davis is terminated from her position," Robert announced. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can't do this. It's nepotism. I've dedicated years to this company." "This isn't about my son," Robert replied evenly. "It's about a pattern of behavior that contradicts everything we stand for." Security appeared at the doorway, and Claire's face contorted with rage and humiliation as she was escorted out. Colleagues who had once cowered before her cutting remarks now watched her departure with a mixture of shock and relief. In the lobby, Michael waited beside Anna's desk, his hands fidgeting nervously. When he saw Claire being escorted toward the exit, their eyes met briefly. The woman who had so confidently accused him now looked small and defeated. Later, sitting in his father's office, Michael felt a complex wave of emotions wash over him. There was vindication. Yes, a sense that justice had prevailed, but there was also a heaviness in his chest. "Did it help?" Robert asked gently, noticing his son's expression. Michael considered the question. "It doesn't erase what happened," he finally said, "but maybe it means it won't happen to someone else." Robert nodded, understanding that this small victory came with its own cost, the burden of confronting injustice head-on, and the knowledge that even when you win, the scars remain. Claire Davis slammed her apartment door shut, the sound echoing through her suddenly empty life. Just hours ago, she'd been escorted from Innovate Solutions, her personal belongings stuffed hastily into a cardboard box. The humiliation burned like acid in her stomach. She'd been publicly fired, and worse, by Robert Johnson, with his son watching. "They think they've won," she muttered, yanking open her laptop. Her fingers trembled with rage as she logged into her social media accounts. The apartment felt cavernous around her, the silence broken only by the aggressive clacking of keys. Claire had built her career on controlling narratives, and she wasn't about to let a 14-year-old boy and his father destroy everything. Her first post was carefully crafted, shocked to witness nepotism and manipulation at the highest levels of Innovate Solutions today. "Robert Johnson fired me for questioning his son's behavior. Is this what corporate America has become?" She attached a professional headshot of herself looking poised and competent. Within minutes, she drafted a longer statement for professional networks, painting herself as a victim of corporate politics. She claimed Robert had orchestrated the entire scenario to remove her after she'd challenged his leadership decisions. The story she wove was compelling. A successful woman toppled by a powerful man protecting his family at all costs. "Let's see how the board reacts to this," Claire whispered, hitting publish on her third platform. The blue light of her screen illuminated her face in the darkening apartment. She hadn't bothered to turn on the lights, too consumed by her mission of revenge. But Claire had miscalculated. Within 20 minutes, the first comment appeared beneath her post. "Isn't this the same woman from that supermarket video?" Someone had linked the footage Anna Brown had recorded. Claire's blood ran cold as she watched herself accusing Michael, his dignified response, the obvious racial undertones of her accusation. More comments flooded in. Former colleagues she'd mistreated over the years found their voices. Sarah White, who had endured years of Claire's verbal abuse, simply commented, "The truth always comes out." Claire frantically deleted posts, but screenshots were already circulating. She tried contacting former allies, but her messages went unanswered. The narrative she thought she controlled was slipping through her fingers like sand. By midnight, Claire sat alone in her dark apartment, her smartphone screen illuminating tear-streaked cheeks. The device buzzed with notifications, not of support, but of a community rallying around Michael Johnson and exposing her history of discrimination. Her carefully constructed professional image was unraveling thread by thread, each digital footprint she'd left now a testimony against her. Anna Brown sat at her desk, fingers trembling slightly as she opened the video file on her smartphone. The footage of Michael Johnson in the supermarket still made her stomach clench. She'd watched it dozens of times now, studying Claire Davis's cold expression and Michael's dignified response despite his obvious distress. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah White asked, leaning over Anna's shoulder. The longtime assistant had spent 7 years enduring Claire's toxic behavior, documenting each incident meticulously in a private journal. "Absolutely," Anna replied. "No one else should suffer what Michael went through, or what you've been through." Together, they created a secure digital folder, organizing evidence chronologically. Sarah contributed screenshots of demeaning emails, voice recordings of verbal abuse, and written testimonies from former employees who'd quit because of Claire's treatment. Anna added her own experiences, including the supermarket video that had started everything. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, showing Anna a message from the marketing department. 3 more people want to contribute their stories. By evening, their dossier had grown substantial. With trembling hands, Sarah uploaded selected portions to a private employee forum, while Anna shared the supermarket video on social media with Michael's permission. She typed carefully, "This is what prejudice looks like. This 14-year-old boy showed more dignity than the executive who accused him." The response was immediate. Within hours, the hashtag #ChuckJusticeForMichael began trending locally, then nationally. The video spread like wildfire, showing Michael's calm demeanor against Claire's baseless accusations. Comments flooded in from people sharing similar experiences, creating a virtual community united against discrimination. "It's working," Anna told Sarah the next morning, scrolling through thousands of supportive messages. "People are listening." In the Innovate Solutions break room, employees gathered around devices, watching the footage that exposed their feared manager. Many nodded in silent recognition. They'd seen this behavior before. "I never thought anyone would believe us," a junior analyst admitted, showing Sarah his own documentation of Claire's discriminatory comments. Robert Johnson called Anna that afternoon, his voice steady but emotional. "Thank you for standing up for my son," he said simply. That evening, as Young Justice for Michael reached trending status nationwide, Anna and Sarah met at a quiet cafe away from the office. Their devices continuously buzzed with notifications as more colleagues contributed evidence to their collection. "This isn't just about Michael anymore," Sarah said, watching the movement they'd sparked grow beyond their control. "It's about everyone who's ever been silenced." Anna nodded, thinking of the young boy whose dignity had become a rallying cry for change. "Sometimes," she replied, "and all it takes is one truth to break the silence." The hashtag, Justice for Michael, exploded across social media platforms within hours. What began as a single video quickly snowballed into a national conversation about racial profiling and corporate accountability. Innovate Solutions found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare as former employees came forward with their own stories about Claire Davis's toxic leadership. The company's stock dropped 17% in a single trading day. Shareholders panicked, and the board of directors called an emergency meeting with Robert Johnson, demanding immediate action to salvage their reputation and market position. "You need to distance yourself from this situation," urged Thomas Blackwell, the board chairman, his voice tense as he gestured toward the financial projections on the conference room screen. "Perhaps a leave of absence while we handle damage control." Robert sat quietly, his fingers steepled before him. The pressure was immense, but when he thought of Michael, how his son had stood tall despite humiliation, he knew what needed to be done. "Gentlemen," he finally said, rising to his feet, "we aren't going to hide. We're going to lead." The next morning, Robert organized a press conference in the main lobby of Innovate Solutions. The marble reception area, once a symbol of cold corporate power, was transformed into a platform for change. Michael stood beside his father, nervous but resolute. Anna Brown and Sarah White flanked them, along with dozens of employees who had found the courage to speak up. "What happened to my son could have happened to anyone's child," Robert began, his voice steady despite the sea of cameras and microphones. "But it shouldn't happen to anyone. Not in our stores, not in our offices, and not in our society." He announced comprehensive new policies, mandatory diversity training, anonymous reporting systems for workplace harassment, and a zero-tolerance approach to discrimination at every level of the company. "These changes aren't just reactions to a crisis," he continued. "They're inspired by my son's courage to stand up for his dignity when it would have been easier to stay silent." Michael stepped forward when his father gestured to him. The 14-year-old's voice wavered at first but grew stronger with each word. "I didn't ask for this spotlight," he said, "but now that I have it, I want to use it to make sure no one else feels what I felt that day." The press conference aired live across Houston and was picked up by national networks. By evening, Innovate Solutions stock had begun to recover as investors responded to Robert's transparent leadership. The board members who had pushed for damage control now called to congratulate him. But for Robert, the most important moment came after the cameras left, when Michael squeezed his hand and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Claire Davis sat across from her legal team in a downtown Houston office, their initial confidence now replaced with thinly veiled discomfort. The lead attorney slid the folder back toward her, clearing his throat. "Ms. Davis, with the video evidence and the growing number of testimonials from Innovate Solutions employees, we don't believe we can effectively represent you in this matter," he explained, avoiding eye contact. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Just last week, these same lawyers had assured her they could spin the supermarket incident as a misunderstanding, paint Robert Johnson as an opportunist using his son for corporate gain. Now they were abandoning her. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice rising. "I've paid your firm thousands over the years." The attorney adjusted his tie. "The evidence is substantial. Sarah White has provided years of documented incidents. Anna Brown's video is unambiguous. And frankly, your response to the situation has only worsened public perception." Outside, rain pelted the windows of the high-rise, matching Claire's darkening mood. She gathered her belongings and left without another word. The scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the conference room long after she'd gone. Back in her luxury apartment, Claire launched a desperate counter-offensive on social media. She crafted a carefully worded statement portraying herself as the victim of cancel culture, hoping to sway public opinion. The response was swift and brutal. Comments flooded in, many sharing their own experiences with her management style. Others posted clips from Anna's video, showing 14-year-old Michael Johnson's dignified response to her accusations. The hashtag #WhatJusticeForMichael continued gaining momentum, while Claire watched her follower count plummet by the hour. Desperate, she reached for her phone and scrolled through contacts, executives and industry leaders who had once courted her favor. She called Thomas, a CEO who had offered her a position just months ago. "The number you have reached is no longer in service," came the automated response. She tried another contact, straight to voicemail, then another, a former mentor who had always supported her career. The woman answered, but quickly made an excuse to end the call when she realized who was calling. Claire poured herself a drink and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Houston skyline. The lights of the city sparkled indifferently, a stark contrast to the darkness enveloping her career. Her phone buzzed with a notification: Innovate Solutions, stock had fully recovered, and business publications were praising Robert's leadership through the crisis. Her world, once built on power and fear, had crumbled to dust. The marble countertop felt cold beneath her fingers as she set down her glass, a bitter reminder of how quickly everything could change. Michael Johnson's battle didn't end with Claire Davis's dismissal. As the video spread across social media platforms, the 14-year-old found himself thrust into a digital war zone he never asked to enter. Anonymous accounts flooded comment sections with vicious attacks, questioning his honesty and character. "Just another kid playing the victim card," read one comment that made Michael's stomach knot. "His daddy's money bought him justice," claimed another. The cruel words stung worse than the original accusation in the supermarket, multiplying the humiliation 1,000-fold. One evening, as he scrolled through his phone, Michael found himself trembling with anger. His finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to fire back with equal venom. But then he remembered his father's words from that day in the car. "True strength is standing tall when others try to bring you down." Taking a deep breath, he crafted a response that surprised even himself. "I understand your skepticism. I only wanted to be treated with basic dignity, just like anyone else deserves. I'm open to having a conversation if you'd like to know what really happened." Robert found his son at the kitchen table that night, the glow of the device illuminating his determined face. "You okay, son?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. "I think I am," the boy replied, showing his father the exchange. They can't hurt me if I don't let them." The teenager's measured responses began attracting attention. Screenshots of his dignified replies circulated widely, earning admiration from unexpected corners. A popular influencer shared Michael's story, praising his maturity and calling out the trolls for their cruelty. "This young man shows more character than most adults I know," the post read, gathering thousands of supportive comments. Sarah White, who had been monitoring the online situation for Innovate Solutions, called Robert with surprising news. "The hashtag is trending again, but differently now. People are sharing stories of times they stood up to prejudice, all inspired by Michael." Within days, the tide had turned. For every hateful comment, 20 voices rose in support. Strangers from across Houston and beyond sent messages of solidarity. A group of students from Michael's school organized an anti-bullying campaign in his honor. The boy, who once trembled in a supermarket aisle, now found strength in vulnerability. Each night before bed, he would read one supportive message, letting it wash away the sting of the cruel ones. His resilience, so publicly tested, had become a beacon for others facing similar battles. "Sometimes," Michael told Anna during a visit to his father's office, "the hardest fights aren't the ones everyone can see." Anna Brown sat at her desk, staring at the formal complaint form on her computer screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. The victory against Claire Davis had ignited something within her, a courage she didn't know she possessed. Taking a deep breath, she began typing, documenting 3 years of subtle discrimination, belittling comments, and professional sabotage she had endured under Claire's management. It wasn't just Michael, she told Robert Johnson during their meeting. She created a culture of fear that affected dozens of employees. The CEO listened intently, his expression grave, as Anna detailed incidents where Claire had passed her over for promotions, dismissed her ideas in meetings, and made disparaging remarks about her background. When Anna submitted her complaint to Human Resources, she expected resistance. Instead, her testimony opened floodgates. Within days, 17 other employees came forward with similar stories. The receptionist's bravery had created a safe space for others to speak their truth. "I kept silent because I needed this job," confessed one marketing associate, "but seeing that video of Michael standing his ground gave me strength." Sarah White, who had worked as an executive assistant for 8 years, was among the most vocal. During a company-wide meeting, she stood up, her voice initially quavering, but growing stronger with each word. "For too long, we've normalized toxic behavior as strong leadership," Sarah declared. "What happened to that young man in the supermarket wasn't an isolated incident. It was the public face of a pattern that's been hurting this company from within." Robert nodded solemnly. The father of 14 had already begun implementing sweeping changes. But hearing these testimonies reinforced the urgency of his mission. He established an anonymous reporting system, revised the company's code of conduct, and hired diversity consultants to lead mandatory workshops. Innovate Solutions will no longer be a place where power means permission to diminish others, he announced, his voice firm with conviction. The transformation wasn't immediate or painless. Some executives resigned rather than adapt to the new culture. Others initially resisted, but gradually embraced the changes when they saw productivity and morale improving. Anna and Sarah found themselves at the center of this evolution, appointed to a newly formed ethics committee tasked with reviewing policies and practices. Their experiences, once sources of shame and frustration, became valuable insights driving meaningful change. "We're not just fixing what Claire broke," Anna told a journalist from the Houston Chronicle. "We're building something better than what existed before." Within 6 months, Innovate Solutions had become a case study in corporate transformation, with other companies in Houston reaching out to learn from their approach. What began as one boy's humiliation in a supermarket aisle had sparked a movement that was reshaping workplace culture across the city. The story of Michael Johnson's confrontation at the Houston supermarket spread like wildfire across national media outlets. Within weeks, major networks were running segments on racial profiling in retail spaces, with Michael's dignified response becoming a powerful symbol of resilience in the face of prejudice. Though only 14, Michael found himself thrust into a spotlight he never sought. The hashtag #OurJusticeForMichael continued trending, and invitations to speak at community events flooded the Johnson household. Despite his initial reluctance, the teenager agreed to share his experience at a youth empowerment conference in downtown Houston. "I was just buying gum," Michael told the packed auditorium, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "But in that moment, I wasn't seen as a person with money to spend. I was seen as a threat." The audience sat in rapt silence as he recounted how Claire Davis had stripped away his dignity with a single accusation. Robert Johnson watched from the wings, his chest tight with a complex mixture of pride and sorrow. His son stood tall at the podium, articulating thoughts about justice and perception that no 14-year-old should have to understand so intimately. The CEO of Innovate Solutions recognized that while their family had found some measure of justice, the victory had come at a tremendous cost to Michael's innocence. After the speech, a line of young people waited to speak with Michael, many sharing similar experiences of being judged unfairly based on their appearance. An elderly woman gripped his hand and whispered, You've given my grandson the words he couldn't find." That evening, as they drove home in silence, Robert finally spoke. "I'm sorry you had to go through this, to create change." Michael gazed out the car window at the Houston skyline. "I'm not," he replied after a long pause. "Someone had to stand up. I just wish it hadn't hurt so much." The vulnerability in his son's voice broke something in Robert. The business leader, who commanded boardrooms with confidence, reached across the vehicle and squeezed Michael's shoulder, unable to find adequate words. What had begun as a humiliating incident in a supermarket had transformed into something far greater, a catalyst for conversation about dignity and respect that extended well beyond their family. The pain Michael endured had become a foundation for change, his quiet courage resonating with thousands who recognized their own struggles in his story. As they pulled into their driveway, Robert realized that his son had taught him more about true strength than he had ever learned in his years leading Innovate Solutions. Claire Davis sat alone in her barren apartment, staring at the letter that had arrived that morning. The Industry Ethics Committee had made their decision final. She was banned from holding executive positions for 5 years. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes, not from remorse, but from the crushing weight of consequences she never thought would touch her. She wandered from room to room, past the empty spaces where artwork once hung. Most had been sold to cover legal fees. Her phone rarely rang anymore. Former colleagues had disappeared. Social invitations had dried up. The perfume bottle on her dresser, once her signature scent, remained untouched. Michael Johnson would forever associate that fragrance with humiliation, and somehow that knowledge stung more than she expected. After days of coaching from her crisis management team, Claire recorded a public apology video. She chose her words carefully, expressed regret for any misunderstanding, and promised to grow from this experience. The statement was perfectly crafted, emotionally calibrated, and utterly hollow. Across town, Michael sat with his father in their living room, watching the apology on Robert Johnson's tablet. The 14-year-old's expression remained unchanged as Claire's practiced words filled the room. When the video ended, Robert placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "What do you think?" the CEO asked softly. Michael was quiet for a moment. "She's just saying what people told her to say," he finally responded. "She doesn't really understand what she did." The boy stood and walked to the window, looking out at their neighborhood. The incident at the supermarket felt simultaneously like yesterday and a lifetime ago. The viral hashtag, the news coverage, the messages from strangers, all of it had transformed a personal humiliation into something larger than himself. "I don't hate her anymore," Michael admitted, surprising himself with the truth of it. But I don't think she's really sorry either." Robert joined his son at the window. "True change is harder than words," he said. "It requires looking at uncomfortable truths about yourself." Michael nodded, thinking about how the incident had changed him too, how he'd learned about dignity, not just as a concept, but as something you fight to preserve. He thought about Anna Brown and Sarah White, who had risked their jobs to stand for what was right. Maybe someday she'll understand," Michael said, not with hope, but with the simple wisdom that had carried him through these difficult months. "But that's her journey, not mine." The story of Innovate Solutions, transformation spread across Houston's business community like wildfire. Within 3 months of Claire Davis's departure, the company's stock price had not only recovered, but soared to unprecedented heights. Investors recognized the authentic leadership Robert Johnson demonstrated during the crisis, and the market responded accordingly. "Our values aren't just words on a wall," Robert explained during a quarterly investors meeting. He stood tall at the podium, the same quiet dignity evident in his son now reflected in his leadership style. They're the foundation of every decision we make." Michael Johnson's experience had become a catalyst for change far beyond the walls of Innovate Solutions. Companies throughout Houston, and eventually across the country, began implementing diversity and inclusion programs modeled after the initiatives Robert pioneered. Business journals featured the company's remarkable turnaround, with headlines celebrating how a moment of injustice had sparked institutional transformation. The mentorship program Robert established paired executive leaders with young people from underrepresented communities. Every Saturday morning, the Innovate Solutions lobby, once a place of tension and confrontation, buzzed with energy as teenagers arrived for workshops on leadership, technology, and business ethics. "What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone," Michael told a group of participants during one session. Though still only 14, his words carried the weight of experience beyond his years. The teenagers listened intently, many nodding in recognition of similar encounters they'd faced. Anna Brown, now promoted to Community Outreach Coordinator, worked closely with Robert to develop training materials that addressed unconscious bias. Her experience witnessing Michael's humiliation in the supermarket gave her unique insight into how quickly situations could escalate and the lasting damage they caused. "We're not erasing our mistakes," she explained to new employees during orientation. "We're learning from them." Sarah White led the company's newly formed ethics committee, ensuring accountability remained at the forefront of corporate culture. Her team developed a confidential reporting system that quickly identified problematic behaviors before they became entrenched. The marble reception desk, once a symbol of cold corporate power, was replaced with warm wood and comfortable seating. Visitors commented on the welcoming atmosphere, unaware of the painful history that prompted the redesign. For Robert, watching his company transform was bittersweet. The price had been his son's dignity, a cost he would have never willingly paid. Yet Michael's resilience had created something remarkable, a business where integrity wasn't just expected, but celebrated, where scars became symbols of growth, and where one boy's courage changed countless lives. Michael Johnson and his father sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the Houston sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The past few months had transformed their relationship in ways neither could have anticipated. What began as a traumatic incident in a supermarket aisle had evolved into a profound bond built on mutual respect and shared resilience. "I'm proud of you," Robert said, placing his hand on his son's shoulder, "not just for standing up to Claire, but for how you've carried yourself through everything that followed." Michael smiled, feeling the weight of his father's words. Before the incident, they'd been close, but now their connection ran deeper. The 14-year-old had witnessed his father's unwavering support, not just in private moments of comfort, but publicly as the CEO of Innovate Solutions took a stand that risked his professional reputation. "I learned it from you," Michael replied, his voice steady with newfound confidence. They weren't celebrating victory in the traditional sense. Claire's downfall hadn't brought either of them joy. Instead, they celebrated the resilience it took to face injustice head-on, to stand tall when dignity was at stake. Robert had started a new tradition of weekly father-son dinners, creating space for conversations that ranged from school challenges to the ongoing changes at Innovate Solutions. These moments allowed Michael to process his experiences with someone who truly understood their impact. Yet despite the healing, certain memories remained etched in Michael's mind. Sometimes, walking through a store, he would tense up, half expecting to hear an accusation. The cold feeling of the marble reception desk under his fingertips still haunted him, a tactile reminder of his vulnerability that day. And occasionally, when someone wearing a particular scent walked by, his stomach would knot instantly, transported back to the moment Claire's perfume surrounded him as she publicly accused him of theft. But Michael was learning to transform these triggers. Each memory became a milestone marking his journey. The marble that once felt hostile now represented the threshold he'd crossed toward finding his voice. The scent that once made him feel small now reminded him of his own strength. "Those moments don't define you," Robert often reminded him. "They're just part of your story now." As darkness settled over their backyard, father and son sat in comfortable silence, Their shared experience had taught them both that true strength wasn't about avoiding pain or pretending it didn't exist. It was about facing it together, allowing it to shape, but never diminish who they were becoming. Anna Brown and Sarah White stood at the front of the training room, their confident voices a stark contrast to the silence they had once maintained. The diversity training session they led had become the cornerstone of Innovate Solutions' cultural transformation. What had begun as a painful incident had evolved into a powerful catalyst for change. Being a bystander isn't neutral, Anna explained to the attentive employees. It's a choice. Her gaze swept across the room, remembering how she had first witnessed Michael's humiliation in the supermarket aisles, her phone capturing what her voice couldn't express at the time. Sarah nodded in agreement. The long-time assistant who had endured years of Claire Davis's abuse now spoke with authority. Your voice matters, especially when others try to silence it. The room filled with murmurs of agreement as she shared stories of her own experiences, carefully anonymized, but painfully familiar to many. The company had flourished in the months following Claire's departure. Robert Johnson had transformed the incident involving his son into an opportunity for corporate renewal. Quarterly reports showed increased productivity, employee retention had improved by 23%, and the workplace atmosphere had shifted from competitive tension to collaborative trust. Outside the glass walls of the training room, the Innovate Solutions lobby bustled with activity. The marble reception desk, once a symbol of cold authority, had been redesigned with warm wood accents and comfortable seating areas where team members could connect. Michael Johnson, despite being just 14 years old, had become something of a legend within these walls. His school schedule prevented him from being present at most company events, but his impact remained undeniable. The teenager had spoken at 3 youth conferences in Houston, sharing his experience not as a victim, but as someone who had found his voice. Michael taught us all something about dignity, Robert often said during leadership meetings. He showed us that true strength isn't about power over others. It's about standing firm in your truth. The hashtag Justice for Michael had evolved into a broader movement addressing racial profiling in retail spaces. Several major store chains had implemented new training protocols inspired by the incident, and Michael had received letters from teenagers across the country who had faced similar situations. As Anna concluded the session, she displayed a quote on the presentation screen, words Michael had shared during his most recent speech. Your story doesn't end with what happens to you. It begins with how you respond. The employees departed with these words resonating in their minds, carrying forward the lessons of courage and transformation that had rebuilt their company from within. 1 year had passed since that fateful morning at the Houston supermarket. The grand atrium of Innovate Solutions was transformed for the evening, filled with employees, community members, and local leaders gathered to commemorate what they now called Dignity Day. Robert Johnson stood at the podium, his normally reserved demeanor giving way to visible emotion as he introduced his son. Michael Johnson approached the microphone, no longer the trembling 14-year-old boy who had once stood frozen in accusation's glare. The crowd fell silent as he adjusted the microphone, his eyes scanning the faces before him, many familiar, some new, all united by the ripples of change that had spread from that single moment of injustice. "A year ago, I was just a kid buying gum," Michael began, his voice steady despite the weight of memory. "Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as someone who learned that dignity isn't something others can take, only something we can choose to maintain." In the front row, Anna Brown and Sarah White exchanged glances, their journey from witnesses to advocates having transformed not just their careers, but their sense of purpose. Anna's simple act of recording that day had sparked a movement none of them could have predicted. The hashtag wasn't the victory, Michael continued, gesturing toward the digital display showing Justice for Michael. The real victory is sitting in this room. It's in the new hiring practices, the mentorship programs, and the voices that now feel safe to speak. Robert watched his son with undisguised pride. The company had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more principled. The marble reception desk, once a symbol of cold authority, now displayed the company's renewed mission statement: innovation through dignity and respect. Across town, Claire Davis sat alone in her apartment, the evening news silently playing footage of the celebration. Her perfume bottle sat untouched on her dresser, a reminder of a life built on intimidation rather than respect. The lesson had come at tremendous cost. Back at the event, Michael concluded his speech by inviting everyone to sign the Dignity Pledge, a commitment to standing against prejudice in all its forms. "What happened to me was just one moment in a longer story," he said. "But together, we're writing a new chapter for Houston, one where a person's worth isn't determined by assumptions or appearances." As the crowd rose in applause, Michael knew that true change wasn't measured in celebrations or speeches. It lived in the daily choices of people like Anna and Sarah, who had found their courage, in leaders like his father, who had chosen principle over profit, and in his own heart, where pain had transformed into purpose.